Recently, the actor, now commentator, Ben Stein was condemned in the media for touting the progress the U.S. has made and saying that black Americans, quote, never had it so good. One low-IQ website amongst many claimed the most original spin on things by calling his remarks a, wait for it, racist rant, of course, even though he was in keeping with his personality, just calmly expressing his most factual opinion. The worst thing about this story, though, isn't that Stein may become a cancel culture casualty. Lord knows he could give two shits about what many of these people think, I'm sure. In fact, the matter reminds me of philosopher G.K. Chesterton's observation that the worst aspect of duels wasn't that someone might die, but that they settle nothing about who was right or wrong. For, as is always the case with these matters, Stein is criticized by fragile morons only for making a supposedly politically incorrect assertion involving race, and could suffer reputational and career death because of it, when the real issue is this: was he correct or not? And of course he was, on all points and in so many ways. Only the pseudo-elites don't want this issue settled and that known, lest their stranglehold on guilt-ridden upper-class suburban white women voters and stupid young people be lost as the narrative is debunked. Here's just a few of the facts. First off, a broader perspective is absolutely necessary. As even left-wing Think Progress admitted in 2013, the standard of living worldwide was that year the highest it had ever been in history. America is among the world's lifestyle leaders too, which means that, at least materially, we're generally living a relative life of Riley. Let's note here that man's historical default has been grinding poverty. People lived without our luxuries, including those we considered necessities, and sometimes with a lack of many actual necessities themselves. They had no plumbing, indoor or otherwise, toilets, refrigerators, modern transportation, effective medical care, insurance policies, or safety net of any kind. They might have had to labor, as in bust their ass from sunrise till sunset, to eke out any form of living. You know, all the nasty shit people do around and for the idiots screaming racism and inequality all day, every day. Privation was the order of the day, with Spartan boys in their military camps, for example, living off blood soup and being perpetually hungry. Lives were often hard, brutal, and short. I've read that the average lifespan in the Roman Empire was 22 years old, and in ancient Greece 35. And while these numbers likely aren't dead-on accurate, our average of 76.4 was surely unheard of. Now talk about not getting a fair shake, right? I bet skin color and sexual preferences were not much of a priority back then. And even in today's relatively wealthy world, the U.S. is, again, among the best places to be. The poorest 10% of Americans live better than approximately 70% of the world's people. Moreover, were the poorest 20% of us their own nation, they'd be among the richest countries on Earth. Now, this isn't really surprising when considering how many people worldwide still live on less than $1 a day. To the point here, much the same can be said of Black Americans or African Americans or simply Black folks, as I like to call them. As economist Walter E. Williams informed us in 2020, if, quote, one totaled up the earnings and spending of Black Americans and considered us a separate nation with our own gross domestic product, we would rank well within the top 20 richest nations, unquote. Williams also added a not-so-minor detail that, quote, as a group, Black Americans have made the greatest gains in a shorter span of time than any other racial group in history, unquote. So, now, here's a question for those condemning Stein, one which, if it cannot be answered, will reveal that their criticism reflects nothing but prejudice. And if he's wrong and American blacks or African Americans, or as I simply call them, black folks, have had it better, when and where would this have been? And no, morons, unfortunately, Wakanda isn't an option. Would it have been in Africa today, or 50 years ago, 100 years ago, about 1,000 years ago? Would it be at some point in history in Europe? South America? Maybe, Asia? Or at an earlier time, somewhere in North America? What's the answer? You see, the reality is that there's a reason why, after being asked his impressions of Africa following his Rumble in the Jungle fight in 1974, boxing great Muhammad Ali replied, quote, "Thank God my granddaddy got on that boat," unquote. Yes, the unfortunate reality for the left and their narrative for the last, 40, 50 years since segregation, blacks are much, much better off in the United States, just as everyone else is, you morons. And as with how Romans colonizing of other European lands brought superior civilization to them, benefits are often byproducts of misdeeds. All this said, it's unarguable claiming that black Americans never had it so good in every dimension. For example, in 3/4 of 19th century slave families, all the children had their same mother and father. Dr. Williams also remarked in 2020. Quote, "In New York City in 1925, 85% of black households were two parents. In fact, 5 in 6 children under the age of 6 lived with both parents," unquote. The professor continued, quoting another researcher. Williams further tells us that in 1938, only 11% of black children were born to unwed mothers. Today, 73% are. So, a little difference, right? This broken home status and rampant fatherlessness breeds a host of social ills, such as crime and violence, including frequent black-on-black homicides, drug use, poor education and occupational outcomes, and generally irresponsible behavior. All these ills were, to note, far less common in the black community a century ago. What's more, even unemployment was once lower among blacks than it was among whites. Just consider that until, quote, about 1960, black male labor force participation in every age group was equal to or greater than that of whites, wrote Williams in 2013. Today, it's notably lower. In fact, in some cities, unemployment for black working-age males is more than 50%, Williams lamented at the time, 2013. Probably worse today. Of course, these realities contradict the claim that black Americans suffer today because of the legacy of slavery. For vis-a-vis these character, morality-related measures, they were faring far better at the time, much closer to antebellum days. Note, too, that remedying these largely moral issues would go far towards closing the black-white performance gap. But moral appeals aren't the racial grievance mongers' business because they're shallow people, often with ulterior motives, obviously. Moreover, the black community's woes are caused by the very left-wing policies and social norms the racists themselves support. Now, at this point, they may say and have said, well, what does that matter? Things can be better, but life could always be better for everyone. Perfection isn't a thing of this world. Reprimanding America because even though she gave you a lot, you have some perceived deficit with the context of the fit-for-a-king lifestyle she has provided is a bit like condemning God for your headache after he gave you your head. So one last time before we call it a day, once again, leftists, where's your answer? If Stein is wrong, when and where did black folks have it better? Don't be surprised if you hear crickets, folks. When liberals call someone a racist, it usually means they're out of arguments and or looking in a mirror. Most of this came by way of the American Thinker. If you liked it, hit that like button. Subscribe if you haven't. Leave a comment down below. There's a PayPal link in the description box, so please put $1 in the bucket on the way out the door. I'd like to thank everyone for all your donations. They're much needed and much appreciated. Now, with all that being said, we'll see you next time.
Hi. Come on, move. Move. Easy, easy.